Hi, I'm Przemek Paczowski. I am a team leader of the QA team in Docplanner, and I want to invite you to my tech talks with people from Docplanner Tech, the team that is making the healthcare experience more human from the product technical standpoint. For our second episode, I invited Łukasz Barulski, a senior site reliability engineer and a team leader in our company. Hi Łukasz, thank you for being the second brave volunteer to be a part of this project.
Hey Przemek, it's my pleasure to be here today.
Łukasz, you have been here for over 8 years. From my perspective, that's a very long time to be in one company. What made you decide to stay here for so long?
Actually, there are two things. The first one is autonomy. I was always able to find a project that was interesting for me, and it was totally up to me on how to do it. And the second is the people. The company really takes care of making sure that the right people work here. Most of us have similar mindset, and I just really like these people.
I've got similar feelings about the people. Let's talk more about your position in Docplanner. I know that a few months ago you changed the position name to SRE. Could you tell us why? As far as I know, most companies use the term DevOps Engineer.
Maybe let's start from the beginning. I was working in a team called Backend. We were taking care of infrastructure deployment and everything at the junction of infrastructure and applications. One day, our CTO told us that he found a very good name for our team. There were just two of us, me and Rafał, who was sysadmin then. We already heard that name and we thought that it fits very well. That's how we become a DevOps team and DevOps engineers. Along with years of experience, we started understanding how that all should work and actually what that magic DevOps word means. To answer your question, I think I should tell you what the meaning of DevOps in my head. DevOps, it's not a position. It's not a person. It's something ending the eternal wars between silos of developers and administrators. It's a methodology based on communication and collaboration, allowing organizations to deliver more reliable applications faster. So naturally, there is no place for a position called DevOps engineers. It's too generic a term that could be every person working in an organization that is using DevOps, developer, tester, anyone. In my opinion, SRE, Site Reliability Engineer, is self-describing and it fits very well to that understanding of DevOps.
That's interesting. Could you tell us more about responsibilities and challenges?
Sure. Our most important responsibility is keeping services up and running. When services are not running, business can't operate. Besides that, we take care of all those continuous processes, continuous integration, deployment, monitoring, and so on. All the time also having security in our minds. Of course, all of that, it's in cooperation with developers, QAs, data warehouse engineers, and so on.
Okay, so when I think about these responsibilities, I imagine that the ideal SRE should not be only experienced, but also have communication skills. What else is important for you?
That's the hard question. Maybe empathy? Empathy with a drop of unselfishness. Part of our work is passing good practices in terms of high availability and optimizations on developers. We need to do that in a way that won't get people angry.
I got the point. But what does it look like when your team is working with developers? Not only in terms of teamwork and communication, but also in more technical aspects.
That's my favorite part. Basically, in each organization, it looks different. In our case, we are a single team, the members of which are also part of other teams. In simple words, each of us is assigned to 2 or 3 product teams to support guys with changes in infrastructure as code, deploying new applications, and so on. Usually, we are attending 1 meeting per week per product team, but it depends on the team, its characteristics, and projects that we do with them. Personally, I'm attending daily with one of my teams every day, development quality, but it's special case and probably a topic for separate podcast. We have common backlog for tasks from our product teams, so if I'm assigned to the data warehouse team, then I place tasks from them in the backlog, so the task might be solved by someone else from our team. Of course, not all of the tasks are worth putting into backlog, as many of them we just do instantly.
I would like to stop for a moment on this topic because, as far as I know, many people that became SRE are system engineers first. But you have started as a software developer. Maybe you can tell us which path is better and how becoming a developer helps you to grow up as an SRE.
Sometimes I feel like I'm playing on cheat mode. Thanks to being a developer, there are two aspects that came to me a bit easier. One is that in many cases I can predict or notice problems with applications a bit faster because I've probably already made that mistake in my career. The second one is that I can more easily make more advanced changes in applications. On the other hand, my colleagues that started their paths as system engineers might, for example, faster identify network problems. What I'm trying to say is both paths are more or less equal, but it's definitely good to have SREs with both of these backgrounds in the team.
So, for all those who are starting their path in the IT field, is it possible to become SRE in your first job?
Yeah, definitely. It's possible. What's more, in a few weeks, a guy that started his career as junior DevOps engineer will join our team. I hope that this person that doesn't know about silos and wars between developers and administrators from practice will have a fresh glance on some topics. I believe that we will notice the advantages of this perspective in next months.
What would you recommend to beginners?
It's hard to make such recommendation. Probably writing an application and hosting it on some VPS would be a good place to start. People learn fastest on their mistakes. But hey, who knows? Maybe that will bring the next prominent startup to life.
Okay, so we know something about the SRE and beginner's path. So let's maybe jump into the major topic. You have been working at Docplanner for about 8 years, so you had an opportunity to see and probably work on infrastructure expansion. And I want to ask you about the solutions that you picked and why. Of course, I have here on my mind staging and continuous deployment.
I even wrote an article on Medium about that, but I will try to briefly summarize. In 2014, manual deployment started to be a problem. We had to bring in a continuous deployment to deliver our changes faster in response to growing business needs, which we did quite quickly. But sadly, along with changes in deployment, we didn't change our mindsets. The number of 500s grew significantly. We were committing changes full of bugs, and we had to do something with that. Changing mindset in a second is hard, so we decided to create an environment visible just for people visiting the service from our company. That's how staging was born. In our case, staging was just another version of application, still using the same database as production. That solved one kind of problem, but brought on a new one. We had to make all of our changes backward compatible. However weird it sounds, it was a great choice. Staging in a very similar form is with us even today. It's more sentimental than functional, but still, people in the company can see 30 minutes fresher version of site. So we started with manual deployments, probably few per week, and now we are doing sometimes even over 100 releases per day.
Okay, but most companies are using Jenkins. I know that you have decided to use Bodyworks. Could you please tell us something more about this solution? Why this instead of Jenkins?
We started using Kubernetes quite early in comparison to the rest of the market. Our team had just 2 members, so it was important to use a tool that out of the box met our needs. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to finish migration to Kubernetes in reasonable time. That was the main reason why we didn't use Jenkins. Doing some research, we found just one tool matching our requirements. I won't say the name to not discourage anyone. After a few weeks of using it, we had so many problems with this tool that some days we weren't able to release new version at all. Just small part of our services were hosted on Kubernetes, so it wasn't a deal breaker yet, but we already knew that this tool is not reliable enough to use in the next phases of Kubernetes adoption. What's more, support of that tool was working in the middle of our night, so every communication had a huge lag, and sometimes solving some simple problems took 3-4 days. Fortunately, one of the developers told us that there is a Polish company which might fit our needs, Buddy. After a short call, they started development for us. A month or 2 months later, we completely switched to a self-hosted version of Buddy.
Okay, and you have also mentioned Kubernetes. As far as I know, a still relatively small number of companies use it in production. But as with Buddy, you have chosen it as a main solution. Could you tell us why?
That wasn't easy choice. The company was planning expansion on Latin America, so the most important driver for that change was a need to serve our sites from different parts of the world. To not let our users from LATAM countries to connect to service in Europe. Latency would literally make our site useless. What's more, we already started splitting monolithic application to smaller apps, proudly called Microservices. We needed something that would allow us to respond to developers' requirements and at some point to sleep at night. Having self-healing. We were sure that whatever that would be, it needs to use Docker, to use the same images on dev and on production. We were trying different tools, but Kubernetes seemed to be the most promising one. As I mentioned, there were just two of us back then. The CTO even hired a consulting company to help us with that. But they were trying to convince us that Mesos, which was their specialization, is the best choice. Despite that, we had the hunch that Mesos is going in the wrong direction, so we decided to use Kubernetes. Time has shown that it was a great choice.
And about the solutions. Do you regret it? Or if you will have a time machine and could turn back time, you would change them?
As I said, no. Maybe I would start with infrastructure as a code earlier.
Why? What would it change?
I think that would give developers more control and autonomy. Simply, we would have less work earlier.
Speaking about structure, what's the biggest challenge related to developing Docplanner infrastructure that you had?
I believe that was migration from an old infrastructure to Kubernetes. That was really hard.
What did it look like?
That was a long journey. It took us over 1 year. Most of that time we spent on changing application internals. Applications were using some common databases between locales. Polish version of the site had connection to an additional database, which had the possibility to share information with Brazilian version, for example. Obviously, that wasn't good. When we were ready to run separate locales, we decided to start with Czech version and place it in Kubernetes cluster. We had some problems, but nothing significant. We met real ones during the last part of migration, one of the biggest locales for us, by the way. During the migration, we were also moving data on a bit newer version of MongoDB. Just after data migration, but before allowing traffic to reach the application, we were running commands on application that was creating indexes on Mongo and so on. At first glance, everything was fine. Command exited with exit code 0, but a few minutes after enabling site again, containers started flapping. Fortunately, we had a quite good application monitoring, which pointed out performance problems with Mongo. It came out that Mongo was just skipping creating indexes when that was exceeding index max size. As far as I remember, this problem made additional 40 or 50 minutes of downtime.
Any lessons learned?
Definitely. Don't try to kill two birds with one stone. It's not a good idea to smuggle things with quite big operations, as we did with Mongo upgrade during migration.
As we know, a long time ago we decided to dive into microservices. After time and many of them deployed, do you regret it, or it's a good way to grow a company like ours?
I still think it's a very good idea, but definitely not for companies at all stages of growth. That gives a lot of flexibility and lowers the logical complexity of the product, which means that you might deliver value for business faster. But at the same time, technical complexity grows significantly. From SRE point of view, multiple smaller applications are easier to keep running and scaling instead of only one, but big application. When you have multiple small applications and one is going down, probably 95% of features work just fine. It's quite the opposite case when you have just one. By the way, I'm trying to call them just applications. There is a lot of controversy around the word microservice one.
Okay, so any plans for the future with the company infrastructure or team grow?
Sure, we believe in continuous improvement. Probably one of the next things to change in our infrastructure is to integrate a HashiCorp Vault. Now we keep secrets in repositories encrypted by Gitcrypt, but in the long term, it's not the best idea. It's just hard to maintain. About the team, as I mentioned before, we already hired one person in Warsaw, but Rafał from Barcelona already started another recruitment. So, dear listeners, if you are interested, you know what to do.
It's always very interesting to me to talk about failures, to learn from mistakes, and to draw conclusions. Was there any related to the infrastructure?
Probably plenty of them. But I strongly remember the one that I made a few years ago. We have a tool that gives possibility to business guys to make some reports on anonymized version of our database. The internal database of that tool failed. That's not critical service, probably nobody cares if it's not working for an hour. So we decided to just remove it and restore from a backup that should be finished 3 hours before. I asked one of the colleagues if we have some backups. He told me that he saw that the previous day. I didn't check that myself, but just deleted that database. It came out that there is some problem with those backups, and indeed files are there, but they're empty. Fortunately, one of us had a copy of that database on some machine. Unfortunately, that was a copy made a few weeks ago. A few reports and a few users were missing. That was probably the dumbest thing I did. But the lesson is one: when you have not tested backup, you don't have a backup.
Coming to the end of today's episode, any interesting stories from work?
Plenty of trolling stories.
Can you tell one?
Sure. That was a quite long time ago. I was a developer back then. On the day of our first TV campaign in Poland, one of the product guys came and told us that he don't even want to hear about 500s. The site must be stable as never before. He was so serious about that we really had to troll him. We quickly made a simple listener in Symfony that was checking if it's his user and was doing some simple randomization. Around 20% of his requests were just 500s with some silly error message. He was so angry for a moment.
I heard this story about 10 times, but even now it makes me laugh. Łukasz, thank you so much for this talk. It was super interesting for me to get to know your field better.
I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you for the invitation.
And for all the listeners, please let us know if you also enjoy this topic and what would you like to hear next. Check our social media to get to know us better. You will find the links in the description along with the link to Łukasz article.